So thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here, and I congratulate Belgium on an amazing range of events in this European year. Let me explain the logo on the far right corner of my presentation. And you might like to visit this website, which is the largest program of research on aging that's ever been mounted in Europe. And there are many research findings on that website that will help you in developing the active aging concept. This is my agenda in 3 parts. I'm going to look back at what active aging means, discuss some of the problems with active aging, and then try to understand how we can maximize the potential of active aging in Europe. There are many slides, and I will go through them quite quickly. So these are the key messages. 2 of them. Active aging has the potential to prevent many of the negative effects of aging at the individual, at the organizational, and at the societal level. But it must be comprehensive and it must be inclusive. Secondly, active aging could radically improve well-being in later life. It could extend healthy life expectancy, but it must be focused on prevention across the life course, and it has to include a new vision of aging. We have to leave behind the deficit approach to aging. Aging is a problem, aging is a costly burden, and we have to consider aging as an opening of possibilities for all generations. So, first of all, let's look back at where active aging came from. And this is important because it helps to understand why there are some problems currently with the concept of active aging. And although the idea of active aging has been in Europe familiar for only about 10 years, you can see that the origins go back to the middle of the 20th century with the idea of activity and then successful aging. And that as people age and lose function, they should compensate for that loss of function as they age. Back in the 1950s, though, the idea of activity was heavily criticized. For example, it was argued that the idea failed to account for the barriers to activity. People who who lacked income, who couldn't be active, they were excluded from society. It was criticized because it falsely equated different activities. Employment was seen as being the same as volunteering because it was an activity. But, and this is the key thing for us, despite those criticisms, there is this demonstrated link between activity and health and well-being. And that is the absolute bottom line. So despite all the criticism, there is this fundamental, important truth that activity is linked to health and well-being. And now the evidence is so strong, and you can find much of it on that website I put up earlier. The evidence is powerful that activity leads to improved health and psychological well-being. And this is demonstrated even among frail elderly people in their 90s. The research evidence is strong. Incontrovertible, in fact. There is also evidence of the beneficial impact of even moderate activity in preventing coronary heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and so on and so on. In fact, in preventing all of the conditions that limit function in later life, that prevent older people from doing what they want to do. Now, the important research evidence is that it does not have to be exercise. Participation is enough. Being engaged, being in contact with others, leads to improved mental health. And as you can see from this overhead, at least I hope you can see in English, the improvement in mental well-being is stronger in research terms than losing weight, giving up smoking, and taking exercise. It's very powerful. Now, that activity perspective led to a whole lot of other concepts that are more or less the same. Successful aging, positive aging, optimal aging. And it's interesting that in the US they still refer to active aging as successful aging. In Australia they call it positive aging. But it more or less amounts to the same thing. It's the activity perspective. And all of them set a standard or norm. They try to tell us what aging should be. And very often, this is the stereotype. An extraordinarily healthy 89-year-old. In other words, the standard is impossible for most people to achieve. And that's the key problem with the stereotyping of successful or positive or optimal aging. Okay, let's look at active aging. Because this appeared in Europe in the late 1990s from the WHO. And I think that this was a path-breaking development. Because active aging took from the activity perspective the link between activity and well-being, but it did not apply it only to older people. It spread it across the whole of the life course. And that is the fundamental point about active aging. Not older people, but everyone. You age from the moment you were born, arguably from before the moment you were born. So the crucial point about active aging, it's a life course perspective. So, preserving physical and mental health is a lifelong process, not simply a matter for when people are over 60 or 65. And you know that the WHO promoted the concept of active aging globally. But there's a problem. Active aging started life as a scientific concept. No problem. But then the policymakers got hold of it. And there's always a problem when a scientific concept is taken into the policy world, because the policymakers move away from the evidence-based and they put their own priorities into the concept. And that's where we are at the moment, with some confusion about what active aging means. It was taken up by the UN, and you know very well in Europe This is the European Year of Active Aging and Solidarity. In fact, there was a major conference in Brussels back in 1999 on active aging. And these European years are very helpful opportunities to spread the word and to encourage the member states to take action. And of course, the concept of active aging, the European year, fits very well with the new European priority, which is the post-Lisbon priority of extending healthy life expectancy, the European Innovation Partnership on active and healthy aging. Now, let's reflect for a moment on the downside of active aging. And I put it in a nutshell. Active aging means different things to different people. Therefore, I find it helpful to put active aging as a continuum with two extreme poles. At one end, at the top, is active aging as working longer. We must keep people in the labour market, we must encourage them to work longer, and all of the policy prescriptions must be focused on that. This is a very blunt instrument. Work longer is the compulsion. In contrast, at the other end is a much more comprehensive notion of active aging. It doesn't ignore working longer, but actually it argues if we want people to work longer, we have to do much more than tamper with regulations in the labour market. We have to have a life course perspective which encourages health and well-being through the middle years as well as in the later part of the life course. That is the crucial point. We can achieve the goal of working longer better by taking the more comprehensive approach to active aging, which joins up employment, health, well-being, environment, housing, all of those things that are necessary in order to keep people engaged and active. Crucially, this more comprehensive version emphasises the life course. The limited version, working longer, just focuses on older workers and the labour market. And my argument is that version will never achieve its goal, because for the most part it's too late by the time people are already older workers or beyond. So we need early intervention if we want to achieve this goal. Now, in practice, there is no country in Europe that has a comprehensive version of active aging. Maybe Quebec in Canada is close to it, but not in Europe. Everywhere in Europe, the dominant paradigm is work longer. Even the European year does not take a broad view of aging across the life course, but tends to focus on older people. Whereas we need to include all generations in this process, and the key points here are around older people remaining or becoming more involved. The first objective of the European year focus very strongly on older people, not the life course. So, how can we rescue the concept of active aging from a very limited conceptualization to the much broader focus that I'm trying to argue for? There are 7 basic elements that need to be addressed if we're going to do this. And I'm going to go through them rather rapidly. The first one, we must adopt a life course perspective. Our approach must be to maintain or to help people regain a loss of function. So the idea is to raise that disability curve until it's flat. So we don't assume that as people age, they will lose function. Why should we assume that? It's become part of our mentality. We should not assume that. Let's raise the curve and encourage activity and participation. I'll skip that one. An important point is that we have to think in terms of mental capacity as well as physical capacity. And so there are ways in which people can maintain their mental capacity in the same way that eating fresh fruit and vegetables and taking exercise can sustain our physical activity. Secondly, in scientific terms, the active ageing perspective is based on this fundamental assumption. Aging is not about the number of years, chronology. Aging is loss of function. That's what older people will tell you aging is. How they feel, what they can do. Scientifically, that's the case as well. Now, if aging is loss of function, what causes loss of function? It's not biology. It's environmental factors. And you can split that 75% environment, 25% genetics. Now, if you grasp that fundamental point, then aging is malleable. It does not have to lead to loss of function at the age of 60 or 65 or 70. We can sustain it providing we can alter those environmental factors that lead to loss of function. It means that we can take individual and collective action to prevent the conditions that lead to loss of function. Thirdly, we have to understand heterogeneity or variability in aging. There's a group of women in long-term institutions compared to our very fit 89-year-old. So people of the same age can end up in very different physical and mental conditions. Why is that? Because of environmental factors and individual lifestyle. Therefore, we can change that. We can't make everyone, at least I hope we don't want to make everyone, the ultra-fit 89-year-old, but we can prevent loss of function. Now, my fourth point is that the working longer paradigm is top-down. The policymakers tell the older workers you have to work longer. A more comprehensive version of active ageing should also be bottom-up. It should reflect everyday priorities. And here's the evidence from some research in the UK, which asked older people, what are the foundations of a good quality of life in old age? And you can see that what older people say is more or less all about participation. We want to be engaged. We want to be part of society. We want to live in good neighbourhoods where we can interact with other people. Similarly, when they're asked what maximises your quality of life, these are the things they say. And these are about engagement and participation. And I would be amazed if older people in Belgium say anything different to older people in the UK. The priority is about maintaining health and independence, having safe areas to walk or cycle in, participation, transport, those things. Let me emphasize the challenge that Europe faces if it wants to extend healthy life expectancy on average by 2 years, by 2020. It can't do it. It can't do it because of the significant variation between member states in healthy life expectancy. So in Estonia, a woman aged 65 has 2 years healthy life expectancy. In Sweden, same woman, age 65, would have 13, 14 years healthy life expectancy, 7 times the average in Estonia. Those are very big differences. Similarly for men. Even at age 80, there are big variations in life expectancy. So, for example, at age 80, the average life expectancy, not healthy life expectancy, in Belgium is 1 year less than France. And then finally, my 5th, 6th and 7th essential elements of active ageing all concern policymakers. And the argument here is that a comprehensive approach to active ageing must operate at all levels of policy. At the macro level, societal, at the organisational level, what employers and other organisations do, but also at the micro level. How can we support activity and participation among older people, but also those in earlier years? We have to have upstream policy measures, those are preventative policy measures, and we have to have downstream policy measures, those things that help people, once they have some loss of function, to get back engaged and to participate in society. So, in summary, these are the core principles that should inform a comprehensive active ageing strategy. It should be all activities that improve well-being. It should be based on a life course perspective. It should emphasise prevention. It should use every policy lever possible, not just the labour market, but everything that encourages participation and well-being. It should include all ages, and I mean all ages, so no one is too old to be engaged in this process. No one is too frail to be engaged in this process. It should recognise that ageing is heterogeneous, unequal, and therefore some older people require more prevention or more compensation in order to enable them to participate. It should be empowering, not top-down, but enabling, encouraging, supporting people to be participating. And it should respect cultural diversity. So we know that in the north and the south of Europe, there are differences in the way people participate, the values they have for different forms of participation. I know very well in this country there are differences between those in Flanders and those in Wallonia in their attitude towards participation. And I think Belgium could provide a model to the rest of Europe in terms of the flexible approach to active ageing. So not one size fits all, but what is the best approach for one particular culture or one particular region? A more flexible, sensitive approach to the top-down, heavy policy implementation. Here is a definition of active ageing which reflects the comprehensive approach I've been arguing for. It should be a comprehensive strategy aiming to maximise participation and well-being as people age across the life course. It should operate simultaneously at the individual, organisational and policy level, and at all stages of the life cycle. So that was my agenda. What I've tried to do, successfully I hope, is to stress that active ageing has massive potential. But at the moment, that potential is not being realised in any European country. So I'll conclude with those two key messages. And these are the challenges we have to confront if we want to achieve extended healthy life expectancy, if we want everyone in our society to age actively and in good health. And I think the biggest challenge we face is to replace the deficit approach to ageing, that older people are a burden, cost to society, with a much more positive vision. And that vision should be a society for all ages, where everyone is valued, where everyone is encouraged to participate, where everyone has something to contribute. Thank you very much. Merci.